On World News Tonight this Sunday, President Bush rejects a new Taliban offer to hand over Osama bin Laden.
There's no need to negotiate. There's no discussions. I told them exactly what they need to do.
3 more people test positive for anthrax exposure in New York. Before September 11th, they kept America's hotels running. Now they are out of work without a safety net. And eyewitness to tragedy, the healing power of pictures.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight, Sunday.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Carol Simpson. Today, foreign journalists got their first look at the devastation in Afghanistan. It was a tour orchestrated by the Taliban of an area where the Taliban says at least 200 civilians were killed. And President Bush has again refused to make a deal with Taliban authorities to stop the airstrikes. We start with that report from ABC's Josh Gerstein at the White House.
Returning from Camp David this afternoon, President Bush firmly rejected the Taliban's offer to discuss turning Osama bin Laden over to a neutral country for trial.
They must have not heard. There's no negotiation. This is non-negotiable.
Taliban officials said today they would hand bin Laden over if the U.S. ends its airstrikes and provides proof of his guilt.
If he is involved in any kind of terrorist act, America should provide evidence, and then we would discuss his putting on trial.
The president said repeatedly that he would end the military campaign if the Taliban meets his demands to surrender bin Laden and his associates, shut down their training camps, and release aid workers being held in Afghanistan. But Mr. Bush dismissed the request for evidence.
There's no need to discuss innocence or guilt. We know he's guilty. Turn him over. If they want us to stop our military operations, they just got to meet my conditions.
Neither the president nor any American official has ruled out the possibility of a trial for bin Laden in a third country. But Mr. Bush made clear today that alone would not be enough to end the strikes on Afghanistan. Today, U.S. aircraft continued to pound targets in Afghanistan, including airports, military training facilities, tanks, and planes. U.S. officials said they were in cleanup mode, returning to bomb targets missed in the initial attacks. Josh Gerstein, ABC News, the White House.
Today's airstrikes began week 2 of the U.S. military campaign against the Taliban and Osama bin Laden. ABC's David Wright reports tonight from northern Afghanistan.
This was the front line near Kabul tonight as U.S. bombs and Taliban anti-aircraft fire lit the skies for the 8th night in a row. Earlier today, for the very first time, the Taliban allowed foreign journalists to document the damage. The Taliban claims some 200 civilians in a village near Jalalabad were killed by a stray U.S. missile. If that's true, it would be the deadliest strike so far in the war. The Islamic militia escorted the press through a residential area littered with shrapnel. Inside one house, a blood-stained pillowcase. Outside another, dozens of dead sheep and goats, as well as what appeared to be body parts. Villagers were still digging through the rubble looking for bodies. The air has a rancid stench. At one point during the tour, angry villagers tried to mob the journalists. The Taliban militia had to restrain them. The villagers shouted anti-U.S. slogans and expressed their support for Osama bin Laden. America is asking us to hand over Osama, said this man. Here in Afghanistan, everyone is Osama. Along the front lines, forces of the Northern Alliance fired on what they say are al-Qaeda mercenaries hired by Osama bin Laden to defend the Taliban. But the alliance has yet to gain any ground across this line. Most of its fighting force is still gathered at the south end of the Panjshir Valley for a possible siege of Kabul. Eyewitnesses say the target of tonight's attacks appeared to be the Taliban front lines, not the city of Kabul itself. And witnesses say the anti-aircraft fire was weaker tonight, a sign that the U.S. bombings may be taking their toll on the Taliban defenses. David Wright, ABC News, Jabal Suraj, Afghanistan.
American warplanes struck a command and control center in southern Iraq today. The attack was reportedly a self-defense measure taken because of hostile actions by the Iraqis in the southern no-fly zone. The U.S. Central Command said the attack is not related to the bombing of Afghanistan. Here in the United States, federal authorities have identified the presence of anthrax in 3 states now: New York, Florida, and Nevada. In New York, 3 more people have tested positive for exposure to the bacterium. Of the 12 people who have been exposed to anthrax, only 2 have been infected. 1 case was fatal. ABC's Brian Ross joins us with the latest on this fast-moving investigation. Brian?
Carol, administration officials today termed the 3 cases bioterrorism by someone and said a connection to Osama bin Laden cannot be ruled out, even though there is still no hard evidence to support such a conclusion. As federal agents continued to look for anthrax almost spore by spore in the 3 different locations, there was a sharp shift in what's being said behind the scenes and publicly. The possibility of a tie to the bin Laden al-Qaeda terror network no longer being ruled out.
In a prosecutorial sense, we basically will not rule out and have not ruled out. But in the policy sense, we've got to wonder and suspicion, as the Vice President said, this could be related.
The key factor is the discovery at a Microsoft office in this building in Reno, Nevada, of a letter postmarked in Malaysia found to contain anthrax. Malaysia is considered a hotbed of bin Laden operations.
These are related to a concerted effort, and the most likely individuals involved would be the al-Qaeda network.
Today, a new development in New York underscored the difficulty facing law enforcement. A police detective and 2 lab technicians who handled the suspect letter at NBC on Friday now have been found to have been exposed to anthrax, 2 of them with spores in their nostrils. Mayor Giuliani said the 3 were in no danger and that their exposure was unavoidable.
A balance has to be struck here between sufficient precautions and making people so frightened and so upset that they're not able to conduct their lives, which means having people walking around in spacesuits all over the city of New York.
Authorities still do not know if there is a definitive match between the strains of anthrax found in Florida, New York, and Nevada. But they say even some of the so-called host letters that tested negative are considered possible links in a campaign that may be aimed more at terrorizing than killing.
Thank you very much. ABC's Brian Ross. The Bush administration is struggling to deal with what appears to be a bioterrorism attack on America. ABC's Jim Sciutto reports its efforts are getting mixed reviews.
Administration officials have walked a fine line responding to the anthrax threat, urging vigilance on the one hand.
We're going to have a special alertness and a carefulness.
And calm on the other.
The American people have got to go about their business.
A necessary balancing act, say public health experts, but one that's been complicated by the mix of partial and sometimes incorrect information coming from government officials.
One of the most important things that needs to occur when there is a public health crisis is for government to speak with one clear voice. When contradictory things are said, it becomes more confusing and frightening for the public.
Experts point to a number of missteps. Days after the World Trade Center attacks, Health and Human Services Secretary Tommy Thompson insisted the nation was completely prepared for an attack with an agent like anthrax.
We got to make sure that people understand that they're safe and that we're prepared to take care of any contingency, any consequence that develops for any kind of bioterrorism attack.
But today, Thompson admitted the country is millions of doses short of the antibiotic Cipro used to treat anthrax.
There are 2 million. We should have 12 million.
From the beginning, White House officials also denied any connection between the anthrax cases and the September 11th attacks until Friday, when Vice President Cheney admitted his doubts.
I think the only responsible thing for us to do is to proceed on the basis that they could be linked.
And in New York, as the FBI investigated a suspicious letter sent to an NBC employee, the Bureau failed to tell NBC or the city health department for days that they were testing for anthrax. Health experts say the nation has to improve communication among all the agencies responsible for responding to a health crisis, and possibly above all to rebuild the nation's public health system to provide early warning and treatment of a threat like anthrax. Jim Sciutto, ABC News, Washington.
Coming up on World News Tonight Sunday, in Pakistan, anti-American protests turn violent.
This is World News Tonight, Sunday, brought to you by Advil Liquid Gels.
Used to be, I could set fire to the keyboard, but recently it felt like my arthritis was choosing the notes. I thought my jazz days were numbered, but my doctor said no way. For minor arthritis, you've got to keep those joints moving, and he recommended Advil to make it easier. It's strong enough to let me control the pain, and Advil is gentle on my stomach. Hear that? That's me playing again.
Take Advil and take control.
I ate Quaker oatmeal for 30 days. It actually works to remove cholesterol from your body, knocks it right out. Helped me drop 13 points. That's quite a break. Quaker oatmeal warms you heart and soul.
So who's this Lisa who called?
Just a girl.
I saw them holding hands.
So you like her?
She's okay.
She smokes cigarettes.
She smokes?
She tried it once with her friends.
So what do you think about that?
I think it's a bad idea. We talked about that, remember?
Yeah, I remember.
Anyway.
Hey, Lisa, you guys want a cigarette?
She doesn't do that anymore. She's cool.
How come she likes you?
Mom, he's gonna
Talk to your kids about not smoking. They'll listen.
For big savings on brake service, stop into Meineke. You'll get 50% off, lifetime brake pads and shoes. But you better hurry before these big savings are gone.
At Meineke, you won't pay a lot, but you'll get a lot.
Islamic militants held anti-American protests in several cities in Pakistan today. ABC's Dan Harris reports from Islamabad. Protesters are also showing anger against the Pakistani regime, which is supporting the American effort.
In the southern city of Jacobabad today, 3,000 protesters tried to storm an airbase being used by the U.S. military. 2 died in clashes with police and paramilitary troops. The anger is directed at America and at one of America's most important allies, Pakistani President General Pervez Musharraf. In Karachi, at a rally attended by 12,000 people, the leader of Pakistan's largest religious party called on the country's generals to topple Musharraf. With a nationwide strike planned for tomorrow, Pakistan's fundamentalist protest movement is a cause for concern for the Musharraf government. However, most analysts say the high decibel vitriol does not reflect mainstream public opinion.
If you're worried about Musharraf's control over the situation, you should not.
Still, the president isn't taking any chances.
The Musharraf government is now threatening to deport any Afghan refugees who participate in demonstrations and to arrest anyone who participates in violent protests and try them under anti-terrorist laws.
The government has also arrested the clerics behind the protests and sent paramilitary troops into the cities that have experienced the most unrest. The reason? Mainstream public opinion could ultimately turn.
The greater the damage and to collateral damage, and the larger the number of Afghan refugees that enter Pakistan, the greater will be the worry and concern in Pakistan.
The challenge for Musharraf? The collateral damage is mounting, the refugee crisis is growing, and the U.S. operation has no end in sight. Dan Harris, ABC News, Islamabad.
In 8 days of bombing Afghanistan, Allied warplanes have not delivered a knockout punch to the Taliban front lines. A knockout punch that would allow the Northern Alliance to advance into Kabul. Earlier, I spoke with ABC's George Stephanopoulos in Islamabad. I asked him why the U.S. is holding back.
Well, Carol, the U.S. isn't bombing the Taliban because Pakistan has asked them not to. They are the traditional allies of the Pashtun tribes in the south of Afghanistan, who are the enemies of the Northern Alliance. And Pakistan fears that if the Taliban collapses before a peacekeeping force is in place, then the Northern Alliance will start a bloodbath.
For